Now, let's go to the latest in-depth report regarding the ongoing rise of fintech in Europe by Robin Wauters, founding editor of Tech.eu. Robin is a seasoned technology journalist, analyst, keynote speaker, and event curator, as well as the founding editor of Tech.eu, the premier source of European tech news, data analysis, and market intelligence. He was formerly the European editor of the Next Web, and before that, a senior editor at TechCrunch. Robin is also one of the co-founders of P-Central, the digital campus located in Brussels Central Station that has helped thousands of people learn technologies, grow a startup, and have a positive impact on society. I'm excited, aren't you? So, Robin, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me. Antonia Panis, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to join you here for the Cyprus Fintech Summit. Coming here to you live from one of my kids' bedrooms here in Brussels, Belgium. I've been locked up in between those walls a bit too long, and I guess that's for everyone. So I'll keep it as brief as possible. With your permission, I'll share my screen so we can jump straight into the presentation. There we go. Let me just go full screen. There we go. Antonia has already provided us with a very, very nice introduction. So I'll keep it very brief on Tech.eu. We're a data and a media company, of course, focused on the European technology industry. We're a source of information indeed. It's mostly news. Let me just a second. So we basically deliver news, data, market intelligence to anyone who's professionally interested in the European technology sphere. Hold on, let me just. Panis Antonio, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, we can.
Okay, sorry, because it says sharing is paused, and I could see.
We have the first page though. Is the Tech.eu data and media company?
Perfect. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So that was very briefly about Tech.eu. We deliver data in intelligence, as you can see. Really sorry. Zoom is usually a bit more responsive. Now we're good. So we deliver data, we run advertising campaigns, we do events, we help with events as well. And we also sometimes partners with EU projects. So that's just to give you some context on the company. Now let's talk about what you're actually here for, the state of European fintech. A little bit of context. This is all based on a report that we just released in January in collaboration with investment group Finstar, based in Russia, but investing all over the world. We have analyzed 4 full years of data, so from 2017 until the end of last year, 2020. So that's 4 years full of data on funding, exits, and whatnot related to the European technology industry. Of course, we can only analyze deals that are disclosed when it comes to size and the rounds that are actually publicly announced. So take that into account. Also take it into account when we talk about European fintech, we actually include places like Turkey, Russia, Israel, and also the Balkans, etc. So we're very welcoming and open-minded at Tech.eu, so we include those in our research. But first, before we jump to the numbers, we are going to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is, of course, that it was a really big year for European fintech last year, but of course 2020 will always be remembered as the year of the coronavirus pandemic. So before we start diving into the numbers, I wanted to share some context on how COVID-19 and the lockdowns and the travel restrictions and whatnot have actually affected the European fintech industry and actually the global fintech industry as a whole. So as we saw, when countries go into lockdowns on various levels, when you have travel bans and restrictions, there's less things to spend on. That has been very clear from the beginning. When you have less things to spend on, savings rates spike. The demand for loans, especially mortgages, declines. But what we've also seen last year is that there was an immense increase in e-commerce. So that results in a very big increase in us online shopping, paying for things in online banking, loaning, trading, and so on. There's also a growing interest, as you can probably tell from the last few weeks as well, in cryptocurrencies and blockchain-based assets, which is also sort of a result of the COVID-19 crisis. It's not good for everyone, of course. It puts a lot of pressure on insurers and their underwriters. But what is good is that it's not just about startups. It's the entire industry is now going through what I would say an accelerated wave of digital transformation, which also helps a lot of the industry players that help the legacy companies in this space sort of make that transition to a cashless future. There are also rapid advancements when it comes to the infrastructure, the connectivity, open banking and core banking, the security side of things, and so on, which is of course very important if a sector is growing fast, that you take all of the elements into account. Europe has generally very fintech-friendly regulation, which I think was a really crucial aspect in making sure that they didn't have too much of a negative effect last year with the COVID crisis. In fact, what we will see in the numbers is that most of the fintech companies have actually benefited from the crisis. Of course, that doesn't go for everyone. If you deliver in-store payment terminals, for example, or if you deliver financial services specific to business travelers, just as a few examples, then you are really not in a good place right now. But we've seen a lot of growth in a number of areas. I think the obvious one is online payment processors, but also credit loan marketplaces, the buy now, pay later solution providers like Klarna and whatnot, user-friendly applications that help people do banking and trading, whether it's on a personal basis or for business, crypto exchanges, and the list goes on and on and on. So now that we've tackled the elephant in the room, let's jump to the numbers. This is sort of an overview of what the fintech investments in Europe look like when it comes to the total size and the number of funding rounds. As you can see on the left, we have almost hit 10 billion euros in total funding going to fintech in 2020, which is a record year, but it wasn't that much bigger than 2019. But then, of course, 2019 was absolutely a record year compared to the 2 years before. So you can see that growth has really, really started in 2019, and it has continued all the way into last year. And from what we've seen, even in the first few weeks of January, that's a trend that I think is going to continue.
Robin, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but it seems that the screen is frozen, and I'm so sorry for that.
Oh, sorry. And where are we now?
We're still on the cover page.
Oh, seriously?
Yes, for some reason it's frozen.
Yeah, so that's why it says sharing is paused.
But we do enjoy your speech so far quite well, because I totally agree with you that we are in an era of accelerated wave of digital transformation. I mean, we see things that were supposed to happen gradually, but they are being accelerated.
So apparently it's because I'm on full screen. So thank you for highlighting that, whoever
well, thank you so much.
Did that. So I'm gonna try and go away from that just a second. Okay, let's try it this way. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Super sorry. Let's try again.
It's all right. All right. Now it starts working.
I'm guessing now you can see my full screen. We'll just have to work with what we got. So I started talking about Tech.eu. This is sort of an overview of what we do. This was the elephant in the room. I'm sure we can get the slides to everyone afterwards, so we don't have to cycle through it again. But I was talking about the numbers. So if you look at the main chart, this is where you can sort of see the growth when it comes to funding, at least going to European fintech companies. A massive increase in the number of rounds compared to 2018 and 2019, but also quite an increase in total investment size based on the numbers from 2017 and 2018. So 2019 was absolutely a record year, quite an amazing year, and you can see that 2020 has even delivered growth, not a lot, but even based on the record year 2019 is quite an achievement for the industry. This is the number of rounds and the way that they've sort of evolved. You can see that roughly it's 369 or 370 deals per year on average, which means almost one per day, so to speak. But you can see that the number of rounds hasn't really gone up by that much. And that means that the deal size is basically increasing. So we don't see a massive spike in the number of companies getting funded, but the total funding size is growing tremendously. So that also means that the average deal size is growing quite a lot. These are numbers from 2017 to 2019, so it doesn't include 2020, just so you know. But even then, from 2018 to 2019, you can see a massive spike when it comes to both the mean and the median funding. So the average deal size has increased tremendously over the last 2 years. You can also see this when you look at the half-yearly figures of the stages. We were sort of expecting the early stage startups to have a bit of a decline in funding, especially in 2020 with the COVID crisis. But when you look at the actual numbers, that is not the case. So there are monster rounds of funding, and they get all the headlines, the Checkout.coms and the Klarnas and the Monzos and the Revoluts. But the reality is that there is a very healthy undercurrent of fintech startups that are, also getting funded and going through the growth stage. And you can see the growth trend line as well is growing quite a lot. So funding across stages is growing. When you look at the geography, I think it's not much of a surprise that the UK is driving the market. When it comes to the number of fintech rounds, you can see the difference quite clearly with the other big economies, Germany, France, and Spain in particular. Sweden, always a bit of an outlier in European tech, small country doing big things, so they're always in the list of top 5. Now, this is the number of funding rounds. Of course, we can also look at the total funding size. And then the UK's dominance shines through even more. As you can see, British fintech startups have raised almost 13 billion euros over the last 4 full years in total, which is more than the next 5 combined. So you can see that UK fintech is still very much wearing the crown, even though there is a lot of growth across the board, even in smaller countries like Belgium and Italy and Switzerland. When it comes to the actual companies raising funding, Wirecard is still in there. My apologies. Of course, they've collapsed in the meantime. But of course, they did raise the funding in those 4 years that we've analyzed. So we've included them in the list. But you can recognize all those names: Klarna, Revolut, TransferWise. I don't think that's much of a surprise that these are in the time that we've analyzed the data. Klarna was the most valued private fintech company in Europe until very recently. So in January 2021, they were surpassed actually by Checkout, which isn't reflected in this list because we stopped the analysis at the end of last year. But you can see nothing lasts forever. Klarna only held the title for about 6 months. So things are changing quite fast. Now, maybe for the fintech startups in the audience, these are the investors that have been the most actively backing fintech startups across Europe. Index Ventures, which has invested in the likes of Revolut and Funding Circle and Adyen, etc. Very specialist investors as well. Unfamous is one of them. SBI Group, you can see Crowdcube in there, which is a crowdfunding platform. So it's quite a diverse group of investors backing these scale-ups in fintech in Europe. Where are these investors located? In the UK, of course, number one, but also quite interesting to see that the American investors are really taking note of the surge in fintech activity here in Europe, and they are playing a more and more active role in backing, especially the late-stage companies in European fintech, to make sure that they don't miss out on the action. Then, when it comes to exits, then the numbers are actually not as growing as they are when it comes to funding. Of course, this is actually a result of the former. When companies raise bigger rounds and they raise more private capital, their need to get acquired or their need to get to the public markets through an IPO, of course, decreases because they have the capital to grow and they have the resources to do it on their own. But you can clearly see that in the numbers. The more funding goes to fintech companies in Europe, the less they get acquired, and also the less they do an IPO or merger. This is the number of exits through time. The next chart actually shows the value. So even there, you can see very clearly that even if there are acquisitions, the total value of the acquisition has been consistently going down from 2017 to 2019 at least. And we saw the same trend in 2020. It's not reflected in this chart, but just so you know, that trend hasn't changed. So when it comes to the type of exits that we see in fintech, it's usually acquisitions. Almost 90% of companies that have an exit in the fintech space get acquired, so they'll don't necessarily IPO. There are big acquisitions like iSettle, for example, by PayPal, and there are big IPOs like Adyen, for example, in 2018. But those are sort of the exception rather than the rule. Where are the companies that exit usually located? Again, these are the top countries when it comes to tech in Europe, when it comes to funding. So it's almost evident that the same goes for exits. It's usually the UK, it's Germany, it's always Sweden in there. France, for the amount of fintech funding actually going to startups, is relatively low when it comes to exits, but it's a trend that I think will reverse, and I think they'll be very quick to enter the top 5 in the next 2-3 years. I guess that's all the data that I have. I don't know if I actually made it in 10 minutes with the screen sharing problem, but these are my contact details. It's Robin Wauters at Robin Wauters. It's like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, it's all the same. And you also have my email address there if you want to reach me for any reason. Panis and Antonio, I don't know if you can deliver the slides to the entire audience, but I'd be very happy to share the presentation with everyone.
Thank you so much. It was indeed an amazing presentation with a lot of insights in such a short time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know that you're open for questions, so you have already shared your contact details. So we will be more than happy to share it with our audience. So Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for the
thank you for inviting me.